Welcome to Grace Pilled, where we explore the infinitude of God by talking about God, within God, aka interviews with people spanning the vastness of the spiritual path. My name is Hanna, and I will be your guide. I've been studying and practicing in a classical shakta tantric tradition since 2015, and I just love exploring all of the ways that God wakes up within her own dream through the guise of individual people on this earth. For the last few years, I've been working professionally as a guide for others, doing one-on-one work and also giving talks and courses. If you ever want to chat with me, you can book a call with me on my website or join my Patreon, which is my massive library of talks that I've given over the years. We're talking like 70 posts, okay? Oh, and by the way, we just opened registration for our 4-week course on interpersonal conflict. It's called Run Towards the Hardship. The life you want is on the other side of conflict. I will be co-teaching it with Monica, who you met a couple of episodes ago during the last Yapcast. And just as a complete breakdown of what it's going to look like, the 4 sessions are going to go like this. The first one, looking at yourself, awareness of self in conflict. Second session, self and the person you're in conflict with. Third session, looking at what happens in the fire of the conflict itself, the discussion, and the 4th session, what happens in the aftermath of the conflict, which honestly is sometimes the most important place because conflict is about repair. Good conflict is about repair. And you don't just repair in one conversation. Repair is a change in behavior. And so that's the basic structure. You'll hear much more about it on Instagram for the next several weeks. So enough about that. Let's talk about Jory. Okay? So today I am joined by Jory Pryor, interspiritual scholar-practitioner who's rooted in Advaita Vedanta and Shakta Tantra, with a background in the Christian tradition deeply, and a very deep appreciation for global expressions of non-duality. As the host of the Methods of Contemplation podcast, Jory engages in thoughtful dialogues exploring diverse spiritual paths and contemplative practices. He's also the author of Becoming All Light, the Non-Dual Heart of Christianity, inviting readers to awaken to their true luminous nature. I have often sent my own students to Jory whenever they have expressed an interest in returning to Christianity after exploring Tantra with me, actually. And I can think of no better guide at this point. Jory is awesome. Jory is very grounded. Jory is very experienced and practiced. And it's really interesting how I actually have had the experience over the years of people working with me, working with my tradition. I just kind of give them some food to eat. Here's some non-duality. Would you like to take a bite? They take a bite, and then they're like, oh, I think I tasted a speck of this in church when I was growing up. I want to go back there. It happens all the time. It's very interesting. It's you can return to the church with new eyes, actually, potentially. I'm not saying any of you need to do that, but it's something that I've witnessed several times. And so this conversation with Jory was really fun because it's not often that I get to talk with somebody who has experienced the guru-disciple relationship in a similar way to me. And so Jory has the non-dual heart of Christianity and also the deep background with Indian philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, Shakta Tantra. He has a guru. And so you'll hear us talking about the guru-disciple relationship. And then also, literally, I almost made this the title of the episode, but my favorite thing that he said was that spiritual practice is resistance training. Like resistance training, like weightlifting or strength training. Like spiritual practice is resistance training. That is so good. I mean, I might even invite him back to do an episode about like the correlation between spiritual life and training, like physical training, athleticism, all these sorts of things. It's something I've thought about for years, and so maybe we'll do that. But either way, I've been talking for way too long at this point. Let's get right into the conversation. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Wait, so I pronounce your name Jory, right?
That's right.
I got it. Thank God.
You're one of the few.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here because when I think about my Instagram experience, when I think about you, you're like in my head, I don't even know if this is true, but it feels like you're like an OG Instagram person that I've been aware of like forever. I don't know how long like you've been aware of me, but I just kind of feel like you're one of the people that I think back on in the lore almost like, oh, like this person, I've been aware of them for a long time. And I kind of wonder if it's because you've got this tantric thing going on. And maybe it was like kind of like, oh, like this person actually gets it. And so I was like, respect. And so I kept my eye on you. You know what I mean? What's your memory of finding me?
I mean, I was saying before we started, I think I found you maybe like a year and a half ago or something. And I think I got on Instagram around 2018. Um, and it was like a slow thing. Like I am not super adept at social meds. I'm not, uh very knowledgeable about how to create a successful online presence and stuff. And so I was just doing it um kind of intuitively and the way I, knew how, which wasn't very successful, off the bat as far as like um people engaging with the content and stuff like that. But I was doing it more of like not only for myself, like as a way to um share things that I was learning and that I was going through and that I was engaging with spiritually, but um to share with people like me who I mean, when we were talking before we started recording, I mentioned, I live in a spiritual resource desert. And so I kind of felt like, well, there has to be other people like me around here or just in general anywhere that live in a place where they don't have, a Ramakrishna temple on the street or sorry, go ahead. You were
Oh, no, no, no. I'm just like, I'm trying not to make too much noise. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. Totally.
um and so yeah, I was like, well, if I had these resources at a younger age, I felt like I could have done a lot of this processing earlier, a lot of this exploration and finding what I needed spiritually. And so like I said, around here, it's basically nothing but pole building, Baptist churches, non-denominational evangelical churches, which is fine, which is totally fine. It's just that doesn't work for everyone. Um, it especially stopped working for me at a certain point in my life. And so I wanted to basically share resources and be kind of like a repository, I guess, of all of the shit that I was digesting. And whenever I heard someone was hungry for something, I could be like, "Oh, here, try this." And so yeah, that was the origin of it. But yeah, I see, like people like you who when did you begin?
I began January. Actually, my Instagram anniversary is tomorrow. 5 years ago.
Nice. Are you
Yeah,
gonna
2020. Wait, what'd you say?
are you gonna celebrate?
Maybe, I don't know. I just always have it in my calendar and I remember, oh, it's my Instagram anniversary, but I started January 2020 before the horrors began.
Mm.
And I was working at Whole Foods and I just would make memes and post them on my breaks. So that's how it started. Yeah. So, anywho, yeah. So I feel like you've been in my lore for a long time, but now that you've said all of that stuff, why don't we just go right in? Like, you were serving up this almost like spiritual food from this feeling of being in a spiritual desert to whoever might benefit from, like, so, like maybe if somebody else lives in like a rural area or something and they really want that Ramakrishna temple, but it's not there. Like, so how would you describe your spiritual practice and your spiritual life?
Oh gosh. Um, I am a self-proclaimed, I guess, spiritual debutante, like or I don't think debutante's the right word, dilettante.
I like debutante, dilettante.
Yeah, I think dilettante's the right word, but it's actually I think it's from a something Mirabai Star quoted once, but um anyway, I tend to really be drawn to spiritual practices and traditions that say things in a way that cuts across analytical, logical boundaries, and that gets to, like, I call it the depth dimension. And so, like, when I was young, I was at a Baptist temple, and they gave us these little pocket New Testament editions, and I had no idea what I was looking at and reading. I'm flipping through it, and I saw those red letters of Christ in the New Testament, and just the aesthetics of that alone, I was like, I've never seen someone put words in a different color, like, that are so important that they have to stand out on the page. And I was like, what's going on here? And so the more I read them, the more I, like, kind of got this, I don't know, like, kind of like a signal to something that was non-identifiable, like something that I couldn't identify, but I knew that it was somehow different, somehow different than all of the other words that were happening. And
Oh, so it literally stuck out to you on the page, but then maybe it also stuck out to you, like, in your soul, or like you could feel like there's something about this.
yeah, yeah. And so, um, like I said, we're in a rural area, and so I grew up in the woods hunting, fishing. We were extremely poor, so that's how we ate. Um, and I sort of got a different flavor of that depth dimension when I would be, out on the Chesapeake fishing, or in the woods 20 foot up a tree hunting at 4 o'clock in the morning. And just the stillness um, allowed my young mind to just stop. And I was like, what is that?
Oh, you were like intrigued by that feeling.
Really intrigued by it, but the resources that I had to explore that were, country Methodist Christianity, non-denominational evangelical Christianity, which is more about, at least around here, it's very Pentecostally influenced. So it's about kind of whipping yourself up into an emotional froth, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just a different thing. And so,
A good way to put that.
and in these circles, these conservative circles, Catholicism is a bad word. So any of, like, the contemplative Catholic mystics that I ended up later finding were off limits. And so, I actually had a drawer, a false drawer in my dresser that I would keep, Takwon Soho's The Unfettered Mind, and I'd keep it under my false drawer. And so I'd, like, pull it out, after everyone went to bed, and read it and stuff. And I'd go off into the woods and meditate and say that I was hunting squirrel and stuff like that. And so,
Wait, so wait, what I'm getting from your story so far also is that you had a religiously conservative family as well. Like, they would have had a problem with you doing that?
yeah, absolutely. That's why it was hidden, because initially it wasn't. And they were like, yeah, we don't do that kind of stuff around here. Which, I mean, looking back, you can get mad about stuff like that, but people, they were just trying to protect me with the best knowledge that they had, so
Totally. Right. Yeah, like, in their worldview, they were trying to help you.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. So anyway, long story short, the most, I think, pivotal moment for me was picking up the Bhagavad Gita. And my original first copy that I had is over on the bookshelf somewhere, but it's got notes all in the margins, scripture references, because I'd have, like, the Gita and the Bible out, and I was like, holy shit.
Oh, cross-referencing.
Yeah, and so I always say,
Wait,
I
can I
think,
pause you for a sec?
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Because you grew up, so, like, Christian, when as you approached the Gita, did you feel like you already knew the Bible so well that it was easy for you to notice the similarities? Or that's just a question that I have.
I don't know about so well, because I guess it's a sliding scale, because there's some people that really know the Bible really
I
well,
see.
and I am not one of those people. I mean,
I see.
I know it enough to have a relationship with it, as a sacred text. Um,
Ah,
I don't have like chapter and verse memorized like a lot of people do. But certain things stuck out to me, and I would say I've heard that before, and then I'd go find it. Um, so
got you. Got
yeah,
you.
so really the Gita and Krishna allowed me to see Jesus actually in a way. And so it really ties back to those red letters that I first found. And I when I was reading the Gita, I kind of finally felt like, oh, this is what the purpose of those red letters are. It's yoga. It's it's a spiritual technology.
Oh, you mean the purpose of the red letters is like yoga in the sense if it's trying to like yoke your mind to the meaning of Christ or like the meaning of Krishna or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think in America and rural America, especially, Jesus is this figure that people have a lot of different kinds of relationship with. Some people it's like, Jesus is my boyfriend or my homie, or like, a good spiritual teacher, or he's
Ah,
a liar lunatic saint, the C.S. Lewis thing. Um and so I think the relationship that you have with the figure is determines like the type of insight that you get from their words. And so for me, Arjuna's relationship with Krishna is a it's a friendship relationship, but it's also a student teacher relationship. And so
yes.
seeing Krishna as laying out a pedagogy of like, this is how you become free. And then I could look back at the Gospels and see like, oh, Jesus is trying to tell us how to be free. And so reinterpreting scripture in the light of the Gita is really.
But okay, wait, so what's coming up for me is like you're saying Krishna's teaching us how to become free and Christ is also teaching us how to become free, but does that meaning of free feel really different from you from like the average Christian view? Or do you think it's the same?
That's a good question. I honestly, at least from the people that I grew up around, Christians, I don't think that they necessarily believe that the Bible and or Jesus are trying to do that. That's not the intent. I think there's this kind of normally just unexamined kind of mythos of, well, you're trying to be saved, or you're trying
Mm.
to, but if you pry and ask like, all right, cool, but what does that mean? I don't think that that's something that a lot of people actually reflect on a ton.
Like
Unless
maybe it does mean freedom, but they haven't thought about it enough to equate it to that or something.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Christianity, especially in this country, acts as kind of like a social identifier. It's a social identity that we take on to be perceived a certain way, to fit in, or to have a community, or to whatever. And that's not always the case, but at least in my experience, I think by and large it definitely has um, that purpose, and which is for me it's unfortunate, because I think the tradition does have so much there that can help a person to be free, but it has to be engaged in a certain way, and so that's kind of
Mm.
why I try to share what I share, is to try and engage Christian teaching in a way that will bring the most good out of it.
Right. Yeah. I love that word engagement. I use that word all the time too. And I'm almost hearing you say that as well with like, it's kind of like the way that you engage with Christ opens up a possibility with Christ. Or the way that you engage with Krishna opens up a possibility with Krishna. And so do you feel like that impetus towards engagement kind of maybe separates you from the social identity Christianity?
In a way, yeah. But I think it's more technical
Oh.
than intent. I think because I think the intent and I think all knowledge comes through relationship, which is why the guru relationship is so paramount in my path. And
Mhm.
so I don't know, it's hard to explain because there's people that I know that really desire a deep relationship with Jesus, but they're not really clear about who Jesus is. Like, not in the sense of, oh, is he the son of God, or is he, you know, uh, a teacher, or what is he? But in the sense of like, what is he to you?
Mm.
And so this is again where
Mm.
I leverage Hinduism in the various ways that one can relate to God as as a father, a mother, a child, a brother, a friend, beloved, all of the different human ways of relating to a person. And that
Like it's a real relationship, it's a personal relationship.
yeah, yeah. But it's a personal relationship that changes how you experience reality.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wait, okay, so at this point, I'm hearing you share that you're into Hinduism, you're into Christianity. And so it's like when you describe yourself spiritually, you're like, okay, I'm into the depth dimension. I'm not the spiritual debutante. What was the other one? Dilettante. But like, which traditions do you feel inform your practice the most?
Um, Advaita Vedanta probably foremost. Um, and then secondarily, I'd say Sri Vidya,
Mm.
Shakta Tantra, and and more recently, I have a number of Tibetan Buddhist friends and teachers that have poured into me, and so that definitely impacts me as well. Um, but I'd say my home tradition is Advaita Vedanta.
Oh, cool. Could you actually like describe what that is? Like in the best way possible?
Yeah, so Advaita just means not to, and Vedanta means the end of the Vedas, or you could say the conclusion of the Vedas, which are the oldest extant Hindu scriptures um, around still. And so it's kind of like a interpretation tradition that basically looks back at the Upanishads, the knowledge portion of the Vedas, the scriptures, and interprets them in a specific way that's aligned with non-duality, which is kind of like
Mm.
dynamic monism, I guess you could say.
Like from the Advaitic Vedantic view, it's this dynamic monism.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, kind of, and this is, I think, the problem, and this is the side tangent, but this is just a bone that I always have to pick is that like, um, if you try to learn about Advaita Vedanta from many resources out there, really learn a lot of the scholarly resources interpret Advaita in a similar way as like Madhyamaka Buddhism. And so they see it as like world denying, they see it as like
I
this
see.
static monad thing, which, you know, if you are actually engaged in learning as a spiritual tradition for your own
Mm-hmm.
self and you're in conversation with the text
Yes, I feel you. Mm-hmm.
with a living teacher, it quickly becomes apparent like that's not at all what they're saying. So I always have to just get
Oh. You mean like, am I almost hearing you say like at first glance, it seems like this like brutally world-denying worldview, but if you actually engage with it deeper, you see that's not the case?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Wait, so would you say that Vishista's yoga is an Advaitic Vedanta text?
In my lineage, yeah, we
That's right. Okay, that's why I'm familiar with that because in my tradition, we definitely refer to Vishista's yoga a lot. But something that my guru says a lot is like people tend to read it later in life because it is so brutally like world denying. But at the same time, it's not like you're saying it's not that's not the whole truth of it, but it has that tone of kind of like, oh, maybe I should just give everything up. You know? Does that check out for you?
yeah. I think and what it always comes down for me, and this is how I approach like any kind of interreligious or interspiritual work, is that like 99% of the differences that we feel are insurmountable are mainly pedagogical. It's mainly like where you are spiritually, what your relationship is with your own bullshit,
Yeah.
where you can bite on to the teaching. And so in my tradition of Advaita, it gives you this kind of world denying pedagogy as a tool to use, and then when you're done with the tool, you toss it out. But you have to use the tool that's there, if you're in the tradition.
Mhm. Oh, it's like part of the tradition to use those tools, but there's also some level of engagement because this tradition is informing your life and you're married and you're in the world and you're doing stuff. So you haven't like become a total, is it an inner renunciation or something? Like,
Yeah. Like there's a couple different types of renunciation that like Vidyaranya talks about in Panchadashi, but um he basically says there's the renunciation of the seeker and then the renunciation of the knower. And so when we think of traditionally, like the renunciation of the seeker is when you give away all your shit and you go off into the forest and become a hermit and do all that stuff. And then the renunciation of the knower is more that internal renunciation once you have a working intimate knowledge of reality, you are able to go back into the world and engage with it in a way that not detached but unattached. That you can really actually enjoy life much more, I think,
yes.
because it's not working you're working with it.
Yes. I feel you. Yeah, when you say unattached, I feel like I when I describe non-attachment, it's like I'm okay with this thing and I'm okay without the thing.
Hmm.
Is that kind of like the state of like somebody who's renounced the seeker? Is that what it was? Like, or it was the second
the
one?
the second one, the
Mhm.
renunciation. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like more of this like because everything is so deep in my it's like so deep that it's almost unconscious now. I don't have to even try to be unattached because that's just where I'm operating from.
Yeah, and it's called renunciation of the knower because um you at this point, I think, in the spiritual path can see that the world and the phenomenological experience of our lives like is not what brings us happiness. It's not what brings us sadness. It's not what brings us suffering. It's neutral, and it's we that import that meaning onto it. And so it's not necessary to avoid or to accept or reject, as the Buddhists would say, um, because it's not coming from out there.
Aha. Yeah, I feel like the main teaching of Vishista's yoga is the world is as you see it. And so I'm kind of like getting the sense from you that like you're very into this like mind yoga where it's like it's all about the way that you're looking at everything. Does that feel true?
Yeah, I mean, Vedanta is kind of the colloquial phrase is jnana yoga, so the yoga of knowledge. It's all in how we my guru calls it tuning up the mind. You're tuning it up like an instrument. So like
Yes, I love that.
when I play music very badly, and so like if you have two strings on a guitar and one of them's out of tune and you play both of them, you'll hear this like wah 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 wah, this like oscillation until you tune it up or down or whatever to match the other string, and then it comes into harmony, it comes into unison. Um, and so I think for me that's the purpose of the scripture and the guru relationship is you have this other string that you're tuning to.
Oh, you're speaking my language, brother. Yes. That's spot on. That's spot on. Yeah, my guru, he uses this phrase a lot. It's almost like the guru, and this is his experience because he has gurus too. It's like the guru is almost like hitting a tuning fork, and then you're just trying to tune yourself to that same sound. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's very similar. Yeah. Okay, wait. So can we like start from the beginning? Like I'm getting the sense like you grew up in a very religious environment, and then you told us a little bit about how like you would hide the books, and then the reading the New Testament, and going out in the woods, and then also hunting and all of the discipline of that. But like, when do you kind of feel like you started to? The word that comes up for me is like transgress. Like, when do you kind of feel like you started to transgress from like the religion of your family?
Oh, real early.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably when I was hiding religious paraphernalia and things like that. It definitely felt like I had crossed a threshold where like I couldn't necessarily go back, even though, in my teen years, because my family was deeply involved in the church, and so I had to be deeply involved in the church as well. Um, I made great relationships there, and still many people that I'm friends with, um, and things that I think impacted me in a beneficial way. But then after that, it was, I think, the discovery of the Gita that drew that line where I was like, okay, there's a difference.
Oh, because then you were like really going out to a totally different religious paradigm.
I don't know if I'd even say a different religious paradigm. I'd say like exploring what Christianity could be if it lost all the trappings of culture and empire and wisdom and all these things. So for me, initially, it was like research. It was what am I missing? And it wasn't to like go somewhere else. It was like you're like I need someone else to explain it to me.
Oh,
Like you're explaining the same thing, but I need somebody else to explain it to me because
or to explain it in a new way.
yeah, to explain it in a new way, in a way that I could digest, in a way and I think I said this in my book that like I think when you grow up hearing something so often, it's just completely rhetorically neutral. The words just kind of wash over you, and they don't mean anything more at a certain because you've heard them so often, and it's not really been explained to you that well anyway. But you don't see that the words are pointing to something else. You just see them as not as symbols of anything. Their words mean what they mean, which is, I think, the downfall of like, this literalistic interpretation that most people approach the Bible with.
Wait, so am I getting the sense that like throughout, like even in the early stages of you doing this research and exploring, you've never wanted to bail on Christianity? You've just wanted to almost kind of like understand it even more deeply through the voices of other people too? Am I getting that?
Yeah, and I don't think I am. I'm not quick to claim multiple religious belonging, even though that's absolutely a thing. Um, but I think it should be an option. It should,
What do you mean by multiple religious belonging?
um, there's this idea and it's kind of come about more in the last 20, 30 years, I think, where places that are and it's usually kind of places that are colonized or that used to be colonized,
I see.
that they have this kind of almost syncretic kind of um, spiritual tradition that incorporates things from Catholicism and things from, you know, traditional folk religion and these different things. And so this idea of multiple religious belonging essentially being that you draw from more than one well, that you're fed by more than one stream, uh, which, in nature is perfectly natural. We kind of see it as this like aberration now, but in nature, it's perfectly common for two streams to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so but am I hearing you say that you don't necessarily feel like that's how you've been engaging with things, but like that's a fine way of engaging with things?
Yeah, yeah. I guess I was trying to more say that I never felt like I needed to leave Christianity because
Yes.
I feel like a place anymore that I needed that I could leave or go to.
Mm.
Once I was able to revisit Christianity in light of, the Catholic mystics and Krishna in the Gita, it wasn't like, oh, Christianity has these walls now. It was like, okay, this is just an explanation of the basic space we're in.
Okay.
And so it's not like it's, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, well, actually, something that's coming up for me is I'm kind of wondering, like, have you always felt faith and connection with God? Like, that's just always been there?
Um, yeah, since I was like real young, um, being being out in the woods and kind of just listening, nothing in particular, just listening. Um, Christians talk about like the still small voice, um, but this
Mm-hmm.
kind of interior knowing in a way, and this intimacy that can be described in words, that has always been present more or less. And if
Mm.
not like a constant, stream, but little peaks and little whispers here and there.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced doubt around that feeling? Or has it just been, you know it's there, maybe you don't always feel it?
Yeah, but my doubt was always, it wasn't like, okay, I'm doubting my religious conviction or I'm doubting my home tradition and then being like at a loss. It was always like, well, now I've got to get the fucking work. Oh, because there's this common idea that, doubt and faith are synergistic. That doubt is what propels us into further engagement, into further
Yes.
understanding. And so that's what it did for me. Every time there was like a doubt, I'd be like, all right, well, let's see what we can do with this.
Mm-hmm.
It always motivated me to pick apart my understanding because I kind of always, I guess, unconsciously assumed like, all right, well, if I'm doubting, like, there's obviously something I'm not understanding, and to
Mm.
more. And so that's what kind of propelled me along.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting to hear you say all of that because I feel I came from such a different experience where I feel like I think when I was like really young, that kind of I love that still small voice was there. My controversial take is that everybody has that when they're very young and then the ego develops and you forget about it. But for me, I was like staunchly atheist. And so I had a very, very different experience. And so it's always really interesting for me when I meet people who just like always had that and then like just stuck with it and then like and worked with that doubt in this very productive way. And so what's coming up for me is I'm kind of wondering like if ever you've been working with somebody or supporting somebody spiritually, like how do you greet people who are grappling with that doubt? Because in my experience, I meet so many people who are so in their head about all of this doubt. And so, anywho, I'm just curious what comes up for you around that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think the people that I don't work with many people, because I also don't like advertise that I do spiritual direction. It's just kind of whoever comes to me. So the people that I have worked with and that I do work with, I think the doubt is not usually framed in terms of like, oh, I doubt God or I doubt that there's something going on. It's more like I doubt me. I doubt whether I'm good enough. Or I doubt whether I have whatever it takes to connect with this reality or to realize this reality. And so most of where that doubt shows up for me is self-doubt, honestly. So
Got it. You mean shows up for you in like the conversations you've had with people?
yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then do you feel like spiritual philosophy kind of can help people to yoke themselves like out of that doubt, or do you think other things are needed?
I think I think usually there's other things that are needed. I think in my experience, most of the time, like that kind of self-doubt, I don't even bring in spiritual philosophy too much, and just enough to like orient
Yes.
to practice. Because for me,
Ah,
and self-doubt is what is um improved or purified by practice. Um,
oh, so in that scenario, you would recommend somebody to start a practice of some sort.
yeah, yeah. If
Ah. Hmm.
they have severe self-doubt, then I tell them like you've got to do something difficult. Like
Oh,
you've
I
got to
feel you.
put your ass on the cushion and like even when you don't want to, even when it sucks, even when you're getting nothing out of it, you just got to show up.
Yep.
And that is the thing in my experience that takes that self-doubt component and um, dissolves it or makes it transparent enough to where now you can, okay, now that you are not doubting yourself anymore, now we can start to begin to talk about spiritual philosophy.
Oh, right. Because if that self-doubt is too loud, it might not even allow the transmission to come through, or it's like I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, like you're hearing the words, but
Mm.
you're not recognizing what the words are pointing to. And so their practice like stills the mind in a certain way where you can the patterns of self-referentiality um and self-obsession can kind of quiet down enough to where you can actually think about what's being said or what you're reading and apply it directly.
Oh, I feel you. That makes so much sense. I want to ask you about discipline, but what's coming up for me, you said self-obsession. And one of the things for me, I'm perhaps arguably a naturally disciplined person, but I also grew it, right? And so one of the things that I tell people who want to become more spiritually disciplined is like you have to stop caring about like what you want. It's like the self-obsession. It's like, oh, well, it matters so much how I feel. And it's like that kind of matters, like for sure. Like we're not trying to put ourselves in bad situations, but it's like if you're like, I don't feel like doing my practice, who cares how you feel?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense to you? It's just like just do it. But like that's I think maybe the yogic trident of just kind of like it doesn't really matter what you want doesn't matter as much as you think, is the way that I would put it. Does that feel like anything for you?
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, up to a certain point, like we don't even know what we want. Like we think we want this, we think we want like comfort and, whatever, but that's not actually what we want. We want to be fully alive and present
Mm-hmm.
here and connected and, you know, and that doesn't come from doing what we want all the time.
Period.
Yeah.
No, that's so true. Yeah, that's so true. It's like, oh God, what are the words that I'm looking for? It's like, yeah, oh, it's out the window. It'll come back. But earlier when you were talking about like waking up at like 4 a.m. to go hunting, I heard that and I was like, oh, like you must have started from an early age to do things fairly disciplined, because that seems like, I mean, obviously you were in a family situation where resources were such that you had to do that. But I can't help but wonder if like just discipline has just been part of your life for a long time. Does that feel true?
I think when I was younger, it was maybe a little more so because um I think when you grow up in poverty, like you just have to do things in a certain way. Like you just don't have the luxuries of other people. And I think that actually prepares you, So in a way, like I think me like when I read like Blessed are the poor, that like that's what I think of because I feel like, oh, being poor like prepared me to not always get what I want, to not always have it easy and that kind of thing. But yeah, to your point, like the discipline aspect, my dad was in the Marines, and so he had
Oh,
me
okay. Got some context.
he had me when he was 20 years old, 20 or 21. And and so his military conditioning was still sort of present. It kind of gradually fell off later in life, um, but I think that was definitely a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And then also, I know from just following you on Instagram that you're into weightlifting.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any like spiritual thoughts about like the discipline that's required to do that?
Oh my gosh. I like
Go
I feel
off. Go off.
I feel awful like sharing stuff because I do it all the time in my stories and people are probably tired of it, but I don't care
No,
because
I
to me,
love it.
like powerlifting and weightlifting is such a good um corollary to spiritual practice, really to anything, to any effortful endeavor. And so for me, it's been really helpful because like, and I've used this with some people I work with, like when you get up in the morning and you like don't want to do your practice. Um, I work out at night now because it just works better with my schedule. But for a long time, I worked out in the mornings. And when I would get up in the morning, I would wait for the feeling of wanting to do it. And that feeling does not come ever. And so what I would do, and this is just something that intuitively I just started doing, was like I have to move my body towards the thing before my brain can catch up and figure out what's happening. So it's same thing spiritually. Like when I talk to people that I work with, and they're like, I just really like I couldn't get there this morning. I was just, and I tell them like you have to just put your butt on the chair. Like you have to just physically like do a
Because
prostration.
as soon as you get there, it kind of starts working. I don't know. Does that feel true? Like,
I think yeah, so for instance, weightlifting, you know, um I might think I might not have the motivation to do it, and then that not having the will to do it, the cascade of will and knowledge and action, I don't have the will to do this, and so then my brain will kind of think up excuses, and so it'll be like, well, my throat's kind of scratchy. Oh, I've kind of got like a sore shoulder here, whatever, and I'll be like, oh, maybe I should just give it a day. And I invent these reasons to prevent me from doing something that I actually love doing.
Right.
Uh, and so then actually bypassing that entire process and going there and being physically there and going through putting my body in that position actually allows it clears the way for the motivation to show up.
Mm.
Doing it is how the motivation comes, not the reverse. At least that's been my experience. And I think that equates to spiritual practice too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Something that my guru says a lot is in regards to spiritual practice is like, there's always going to be every reason not to do it, but none of the reasons are ever good enough.
I like that.
Yeah. And so it's so easy to just be like, well, I want to like go on a walk because I've been too sedentary, or like, I don't know, I'm just like giving like a random example. And it's like, no, I've never regretted doing it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Spiritual practice. And even when I haven't picked up a weight in over a year, but even when I used to do powerlifting, I think that's why I'm like, yes, do more of that. I've never regretted a session so long as I didn't hurt myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And I think showing up, like I always say, like showing up is its own reward. Like
yes.
you get a benefit just from showing up, even if like I'm not feeling great and I go to the gym and I work out for 20 minutes and it's crappy. Like I'm not pushing the weight that I should be pushing. I feel fatigued, whatever.
Yes.
It's always beneficial to do it. And so in that way, you know, I was actually thinking today earlier when I was there how spiritual practice is like it is resistance training. You know,
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
your resistance to your experience, to everything, to the thoughts that are in your head, to the emotions that are in your heart, to the feeling that's in your body. We resist all of it. And spiritual practice is resistance training because you're practicing non-resistance to all of that.
I love that. I love that. That's like sticking out to me as the title of this podcast interview. Spiritual resistance training. I love that. That's going to stick with me. That feels so true. I remember like I'm this year I need to start moving my body more. It's been last year I didn't do it at all for various reasons. But I remember when I was like really in my weight training era, I just always felt all the time there's just all of these perfect parallels to the spiritual path.
Mm.
But I also like sometimes didn't want to talk about it because I felt like it was too like meatheady of me or something, but maybe the world needs to know.
Yeah.
I bet there's so many people who like unconsciously can feel that, but like they haven't even kind of put it together or something. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And if you, I mean, I'm sure you have like some really cool gyms out there in Colorado. You're in Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, around here, like if I talk to anyone who has really been devoting themselves to this discipline, any discipline really, but weightlifting specifically, like talk to them, and because they've been devoting themselves to this discipline for a long time, there's a quality of awareness, of self-awareness, of awareness. There's a mental toughness,
Yeah,
that
fortitude.
fortitude. Yeah, tatiksha. It's, it's this mental fortitude of being able to deal
Yeah.
with stuff not ideal. And it transmits quality of peacefulness. In some of like the guys that are lifting like twice as much as me in the gym, and you go talk to them and they're like a placid lake, you know.
Yogis in the gym and they don't even know it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that for me, like anything can be yoga. It doesn't have to be religious in
Oh,
nature.
totally.
So
Oh, totally. I feel you on that so much. Wow. Okay, wait. So, wow. Okay, I love where we are. I have some lingering questions just on this biography that we're exploring for you. And so it sounds to me like when you were younger and then you find the Gita and then that really like opens up a bunch of doors for you. But then earlier you told us that you're into Advaita Vedanta, Sri Vidya, Tibetan Buddhism. And so can you like paint a picture of like when you became introduced to Advaita and maybe also Sri Vidya?
Yeah. So with the Gita, shortly after I got introduced to my Vedanta guru Jim, who's an old hippie from California.
Oh, nice.
He's not who you would think of when you think like a Advaita Vedanta teacher at all. But he's in the Chinmaya lineage, and um, meeting him and learning from him and sitting at his feet, I think is probably the most salient node in this spiritual kind of mandala of my life, because it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, like how many books you read or how many spiritual practices you do, or um or whatever, because until someone like shows you the awakened state, like actually puts it on,
Yes.
and is there in the space with you, and you're almost like the guru like takes this big helmet and puts it on, and you're both inside this helmet.
Mm.
And then after a while there's no one in the helmet at all.
Mm.
But it also for me connects with every other relationship in my life, because the guru relationship it's weird because it's a love that's so deep and so intimate, but there's zero personality to it at all.
Mm.
There's zero wanting in it.
I feel it.
It's completely completely open. And so
No, I was just thinking like, okay, so you're saying, when you were with Jim, you felt that kind of, I'm hearing this like unconditional love that was personality-less on some level.
yeah. And I think, when I went to first see him, I was in the middle of studying all these Vedanta texts, and I was like, I had like all this stuff highlighted and I had all this stuff written down, and I was like, he lives in California, and so I don't get to see him often, um, but I went to see him with this idea of like, all right, I'm gonna ask him about this. I'm gonna
Yeah.
And dude, like, I was walking to his house. Like I got a B&B like down the street from his house, and I was walking to his house, and like all of the thoughts in my head just started like falling away. And I like go up into his apartment, and I swear I didn't have a thought for like 2 days. Like it was just complete stillness. And so then he was like, "Do you have any questions?" And I was like, "I mean, I did, but they're gone now. I don't know what happened."
And actually, maybe the questions don't matter.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
I feel you on that. I love that story. I feel you on that. Yeah, I've had similar experiences with my own teacher, and being with him for 10 years, seeing so many people come to see him too. It's like, yeah, it's a similar thing where it's like, it's almost indescribable, but it's like, I don't know how to even put it to words. It's like, it's not going to be what you think. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Well, you telling your story, like as soon as I heard you say I had all these notes in my head, I was like, yeah, that's not going to matter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. But the thing that you're describing is definitely a possibility that can be had between people that I think positions somebody in that kind of guru reality, which I think is very different from being with a spiritual teacher. Maybe some people use those things interchangeably, but I think that when you're in the arena of somebody who's able to impact your state of consciousness just by being in their proximity, that's the guru realm.
Yeah.
And then there's like people who are teaching philosophy like me. So I that you even just telling that story is like the perfect example of like what the actual guru figure is able to provide us.
Mhm.
But your example of like the helmet too is so interesting too, because it's like the guru sets the stage for you to realize that you're both the same and that there is no difference, and that it's like that nothing is actually even there. But for whatever reason, I mean, there's so many explanations for this, but God has created these beings that become bridges to the knowledge that is very difficult to attain in any other way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But anyway, what do you think about anything I said?
I mean, it's interesting because like I honestly don't know if I've ever really talked at length with someone who also has a guru relationship that's not in our, in our group. And so, and I think it's different too, because some people go to gym and they do have all these questions. They do have all of like, well, what about this person at work's like really pissing me off?
Oh.
Everything, but like, I think that's wrong. And what do you think about it? And like, and he'll do his best to try and provide an insightful answer that they can digest. But he'll ultimately kind of try to like push them past the conceptual level of all that. But then they'll go away, and you can tell like it. One of the things that he repeats ad nauseum, quoting Shankara, is that like 99% of our progress is depending on the qualifications of a fit student. Like where we are determines what we can hear.
It's karma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you read Chasm of Fire?
What's up?
Oh, it's literally one of the most impactful books I've ever read. I think it's like, I'm not trying to like be gatekeepy about it, but it's like I do think it's the sort of book that only somebody who's been in the guru disciple relationship could understand. But it's journal entries of this woman who was the student of an Indian Sufi master who was clearly doing some Kundalini stuff as well. But she was a Westerner. And so she came to India in the 50s and lived with this guy for many months. But he was actually quite cruel to her. And I'm not saying that's what Jim is doing to you, but in the story, she would observe that he would treat everybody else very differently from her.
Mm.
And like he would like let people yap basically about stupid shit. And then as soon as she had a serious question, he'd be like very like kind of like Indian energy of kind of like stop.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that's exactly what happened with you and Jim, but it's like I think that like whatever however ripe the soul is to go, you get the medicine that you need somehow. And it's like not up to us. It's not up to us. And so in my experience, I try not to have any judgment about what other people are receiving, because I have faith that like the medicine that I need is what I'm getting. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think, and I don't even think it's necessarily always intentional. Like I've heard this from people that I've worked with, where like I think I'm saying one thing and they get something completely different from it. It's exactly what they need. And I'm like, I don't think or if I did, that's not really what I meant, but I can see like, oh, this is what they needed. And so I think with teaching about spirituality, I think a lot of times what you're transmitting goes in many different ways beneath the words that you're saying. And so you're transmitting on different levels, and whatever frequency the other person tuned to determines whatever they're going to pick up.
Mhm.
You know.
Mhm. Yeah, and so then comes a level of non-attachment with what we're saying too,
Yeah. Definitely.
because it doesn't even matter. Like, I think I've picked up on that over the years, that it's like, it doesn't matter. Well, I try to be well spoken, but it's like, people are gonna get what they need out of what I say, and I don't have a say in that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a say in somebody's like experience.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
That's so good. That's a hard lesson to learn, I think, because we're so used to like trying to manipulate other people's perception, not only of us, but like of anything. That's how our norm for dialogue is like, let me make you see it the way that I see it. I
Definitely.
don't think that's necessarily possible.
No, it's not possible. And also, like, I want to kind of transition into Sri Vidya, because I think part of the reason why I'm not trying to like flex and be like, I'm so good at this, because I definitely have my moments, but it's like, to me, I like literally operate from this worldview that like, I'm not doing shit. The Divine Mother is doing everything for everyone. So like, I don't need to like stress about like really communicating this to somebody, because she's working on them anyway. And so I don't know if that checks out with your thing, but how did Sri Vidya kind of enter your space?
Yeah, it was probably a little before. It was actually through Antaguru because, um, you know, our tradition at least is very open and very loose. Like there's no initiation, there's no like uh
Do you
set.
mean with Jim, or do you mean with this other
Yeah,
thing? With Jim. Okay.
yeah, there's no set practices. There's no like he'll always tell us like he has complete and utter trust in our inner guru. And so but we were going through the Tripura Rahasyam, which is probably one of, if not my favorite text, it's one of my favorite texts, because it's the Jnanakanda, it's the knowledge portion in the tradition, of the Sri Vidya, goddess-centered cult of South India. And so I decided, well, I want to explore the non-Jnanakanda side of this. I want to, practices, because I recognized that even though I was doing this Vedantic inquiry, that my mind wasn't still enough to receive all of it the way that I thought was possible. And so I ended up in around Navaratri, taking a class with another Vedanta teacher that was going through the Lalita Sahasranama. And so she asked me, I was like the only bro on the call. And it was like at like 3 a.m. or something, because it was India time. Um but she asked me, she was like, well, how did you come to the Divine Mother? And I was like, honestly, I don't really know. I think it just kind of fell into my lap. And she said, no, 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 no. She said, you fell into her lap.
Mm.
Oh, okay, 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 okay. And but yeah, anyway, my relationship with Sri Vidya Tantra is something that has communicated to me. I'm looking over at my altar right now, but
Totally.
has communicated to me the same truth in a different um different key, a different format.
Ah.
And so
Uh-huh.
I don't see, I mean, there's of course, like, you could say some philosophical, snag points or contradictions, but I think when it comes to um actually a practitioner's mindset, like they're negligible. They're not important at all.
Oh, I see. Yeah. It's not worth getting tripped up on it.
No, no, not at all. And even like, there's scholars doing amazing stuff like Staneshwar Tamalsina, who's uh, a very, very adept tantric lineage holder in Trividya and Kala sects, and he also goes at the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center and can talk Vedanta, and he himself will say like, yeah, the stuff you're worried about is not important, like not a big deal. And so like to me, I'm like, okay, well, this is someone who obviously knows way more than me and has more lived experience in these traditions, like, and if he's not worried about it, then I shouldn't be either.
Mm.
uh, but anyway, did that
Yeah, totally. No, that's great. But could you explain for whoever's listening what Sri Vidya is?
um I don't know if I
To
could
the best of your ability. You said like South Indian, right? Which is true.
yeah, so South Indian goddess-centered cult. There's a lot of ties to Brahminical priesthood and transgressive practices possibly in origin. And the tradition kind of looks on actually Shankara as one of the progenitors of, or codifiers of, the tradition, even though he's noted to be the foremost proponent of Advaita Vedanta, which says like, to heck with all this dualistic God-centered religion, but in the Srividya cult, he's looked at as the person who is attributed with writing Sandarya Lahari, the
Exactly.
Waves of Bliss, and so like, and establishing these goddess-centered sites all through India. And so for me, that's kind of a signal of the coming together of these two things that on the surface seem different, but really are not that different.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's a form of tantra. So you have mantra, you have the sacred diagram, yantra, you have different rituals. It is an initiation um, tradition, and so you have to approach someone who has been initiated, who is able to initiate you, give you the mantra, empower it in a way where it's going to be effective in your practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you wait? Go ahead. Sorry. What'd you say?
I was just saying that's probably not a great definition, but
No, I think that was great. Have you heard the story of how Shankara? I'm sure you have, but like maybe this would be interesting for people to hear, like how he did end up turning over towards the goddess.
I've heard different versions. But what's your version? What's the...
Yeah, no, because I was about to say like I don't actually know if this is like canonically true or not, but like the story that I've heard is that he was maybe like kind of in his like 30s or something, and he got very sick. And he was like basically like dying on the edge of the Ganges. Ganges, I'm so American, but you know what I mean. And he sees this like old woman walking by, and he's like, "Oh, please, can you get me some water from the river? I'm dying." And the old woman transforms into like Lalita or into Saraswati or whatever. Like she turns into the Divine Mother. And she's basically like, "How dare you ask me for water? You've been turning away from me this entire time. I am the river. I am all of this stuff." And then he was like, "Shit." And he like bowed down to her. And then he began installing Sri chakras all over India. But that's the story that I've heard. I don't know if that's like actually true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to tell. There's so many stories, and I think a lot of times the bhakti oriented traditions tend to be a little more sectarian when it comes to like things like that. Um, but whether he did or didn't, I have no idea. But I think um, there's a quote that is attributed to him that I love, where he says, before moksha, before enlightenment, duality causes the utmost suffering, and after enlightenment, duality undergone for the sake of love is even more sublime.
Hmm.
And so it's this
Aha. Yes.
condition that like you can go all the way in the Vedanta tradition and then still see the beauty of uh, maybe a more qualified non-dualistic tradition or even a dualistic tradition because there's no conflict anymore. It's
Yes.
not like you're part of a sect now where you're the non-dual one and everyone else is
Yes.
dual. If that's the case, then you haven't understood anything.
I feel you so hard on that. Yeah, because I think this is one of the paradoxes, and paradoxes, in my opinion, the gatekeeper and the key holder of all truth. Like you have to be comfortable with paradox. And I think one of the paradoxes of duality is that in order to actually develop a devotional disposition, which is so spiritually fruitful, you have to kind of like fake duality.
Mm.
You almost kind of have to like fake this feeling of God is this thing that's outside of myself, even though like in the big picture, that's not actually true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think like especially in modern American parlance, like we've done away with the daddy god, right? Like
Totally.
no one really. I mean, there's people that do believe in it, but most people don't believe in like this separate being out there called God who lives in heaven, which is a place far away and everything.
Mhm.
Um, but like one of the things that my teacher will say is like, if you think that God's not real, but you are, you're fucked. Like, like that is the bridge. Like that is the way that you get it over yourself.
That's so good. I love that. If you think God's not real, but you are, you're fucked. That's so funny. Does that kind of get to like how, like sometimes when I try to help people who are doubting God to kind of like gently help them see it in a new way, just because I don't actually care if anyone becomes an atheist or not in the big picture. But like usually when I like try to help someone see things in a different way, I say like, well, God is just your awareness. Is that kind of almost what that quote's kind of getting to is like, well, you're aware. And so what's your awareness? Like that kind of becomes the question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think I was kind of a little earlier than that, like where someone would maybe be like thinking that that they are really Jory, that they are really Hanna, that that's a real thing, that's
Oh.
permanent and non-transient. Like that, if you think that that's real, but God's not, you don't have anything that can help you necessarily. But I like to like because I do try to make stuff palatable for people who aren't as devotionally oriented as I or others might be. But um, I like to say it's just a short form. It's a pet name for reality. God is
I like
reality
that.
with a personality, and so you kind of in my um path, like I think and Swami Vivekananda talks about this too, but divinizing our personal relationships, but first personalizing our relationship with the divine. And that kind of two-way intersection, when you personalize your relationship with the divine, which is to mean reality, what's really going on, then even if logically you think like, okay, well, there's not a being or there's not whatever, you now have a way to, you have an interface. Relationship is this interface because we're suffering because we feel so separate. And so personalizing our relationship with the divine, however that might mean, with reality, it allows us to interface with it in a way that can collapse that dualism.
I feel you on that so hard. Totally. You're totally speaking my language. I feel like when I try to help people, yeah, like divinize their life, I'm so deep in the relationality piece about it. In this kind of like microdosing duality thing that we're kind of like talking about, where it's like I give people like different options. I'm like, okay, well, the divine mother implies a divine child. So what's that metaphor? How can you live that metaphor? How can that metaphor become alive in your experience? And so, like, if the Divine Mother is this metaphor that we're using to personify our relationship with reality, then if she's this pure, unconditionally loving being, she's going to push you sometimes to grow, and she's also going to love you unconditionally. And she's also going to give you boons of abundance, like all of these things. It's like she's going to try to support you. She'll buy your school supplies for sure because you deserve it, right? He's not even deserving. It's just like that's what she should do. And then she'll also scold you when you put your hand on the stove, right? And so I really try to get people to go really deep into these metaphors. And then if people don't love the Divine Mother because they have issues, I get it, trust me. I'll be like, okay, well, how about the Sufi narrative of the beloved? How about the narrative of like, oh, like you're in love with reality. How would you show up if reality was you were enamored by it? How would you treat life if that was that case? And so I do feel like metaphor, I'm hearing you say this, is so powerful when it comes to actually laying those bricks of connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I mean, that is actually, I don't talk about it a ton, but that's primarily the way that I relate most to Sri Vidya is through that beloved relationship. It's not, I have a good relationship with my mom, but it's never been like a super open or, I don't know how to describe it. It's never been a portal in that kind of way. Like an intimate relationship has been in my life an open portal. And so for me, seeing God as the beloved is really what gets me to pay attention to my experience in a way that's open to it. Because if everything is the beloved, then what are you going to project and why? And so I kind of have used that posture in my path to notice resistance, to notice like why am I resisting my beloved? Like why am I resisting?
That's like a question that you might ask yourself in so many words. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
But also not even just noticing resistance, but even when there's not resistance, even when there's just kind of blasé kind of just experience, it's a bottomless portal that I can just set down anytime and just jump into it, and then all of a sudden I'm experiencing things in a way that's beneath the level of the rational conscious mind, in a way where things don't have names anymore.
Yeah, I'm almost hearing you describe like you've identified in yourself, I have this like key that I can just kind of turn on sometimes that helps me to reorient to the way that I want to see reality.
And bringing it back to tantra, mantra is huge.
Definitely.
With my own path with that, because I always talk about like mantra, no matter what it is, like it's kind of like this just coarse, crude rock that your guru gives you. Like you go into this initiation ceremony and like you think like, oh, he's going to give me this like mantra and it's going to be great. And it's going to be, it's going to be the answer to all of my woes and all of my dreams. And it gives you this like hunk of just bare, crude rock and to polish it. And so you polish it every day by reading. And then eventually this is the analogy that just makes sense to me, but it becomes a mirror. And so anytime that I feel contracted or conflicted, I will bring up the mantra, and because of the shakti and the work that has been done through that mantra, it's not crude anymore. It's transparent to me. And so I can bring up that mantra and it's like a mirror. I can immediately see past whatever's contracting because of that transparency that's been built up over polishing that thing like 10,000, 100,000 times.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Okay. So through the work of I feel like from our tradition, we would say like you've empowered the mantra on some level through your own, through your own work, like through your own self-effort. It's become like this pool or like this mirror. And then do you feel like at that stage it's like you're able to just kind of like pull it out and then it can just it shows back to you maybe quicker than it would be otherwise, like kind of like what you need to go forward with or how you need to look at something or
Yeah, it's more like almost like a windshield wiper in a way.
yeah.
I don't have to sit there and think like, all right, well, philosophically, what's going on here? I can just bring up the mantra and it's like a windshield wiper.
Yes. Oh, I totally know exactly what you mean. And sometimes I think I've described that or like talked to people about that. And they're like, is that just you like spiritually bypassing yourself and not like looking at the problem?
Mm.
And I'm like, no, it's like a secret other thing that I almost don't have words for. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, yeah. So wait, what is the secret other thing?
I think the secret other thing is that so I'm just gonna speak for myself, like from our Shakta view, it's like the mantra is God.
Mm. Yeah.
And so it's not like I'm just saying words or some shit. It's like I am keeping company with God when I say the mantra. And so it's like on some level, maybe, if I'm like really like whirled up about something, I start doing the mantra and then it all starts falling away. It's like that's because it's almost like her radiance is like, yeah, none of that shit fucking matters, bitch. Like that's almost like how it feels for me. But somebody might hear that and say, well, don't you need to figure that stuff out? Like, aren't those your emotions? Like, don't you need to be with your emotions? And I'm like, maybe sometimes. But other times her radiance will just light you up and you're like, oh, none of that shit actually is doing me any service.
Yeah.
It's better to just keep company with her. But I think it's nuanced. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I have a weird kind of conception of a spiritual bypass. I think because of my relationship with Jim, with
Uh-huh.
Vedanta.
Yeah.
He'll talk about it and say like, you know, like, is this spiritual bypassing? Absolutely.
Mhm.
And he'll say basically because the methodology of, at least in the Vedantic sense, is you do bypass a lot of stuff and you do the integration work after.
Mm,
So it's almost just like a reversed um, methodology.
that makes
But
sense.
around here, we have one main Western highway, one main northern southern highway, and then we have a bypass. We
Mm.
have one single road. It's just called the bypass. Um, and so Route 13, our main north-south highway, is where all the businesses are. It's where all the action, where all the traffic and noise and movement and hostility and excitement, all of that stuff is on this one main business highway. And so if you want to get anywhere, the quickest way is usually the bypass.
Mm.
So I like to use that analogy.
Oh, totally.
The mind will do all sorts of tricks to try and keep us on business highway, and it'll I've seen, people I've worked with like use this idea of like, oh, well, I don't want to talk about spiritual philosophy or anything like that because it's spiritual bypassing. I want to like be in my feelings and all that stuff, and that's totally fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but in a lot of cases, I do think it can be a way that our mental patterns trick us into staying stuck because we feel like that's the right thing to do. We feel like we have to struggle through the shit and the dross
Yeah.
at all times, or else we're not doing the work. And I think
Yeah.
we have, but um, but there's also, one of the other things that my guru says is the best way to heal the mind is to get out of the mind.
Aha.
And so whatever helps you do that,
Yes.
will prepare you to then work with the mind.
Yes.
You have to be in a place where you can work with the stuff of the mind without being embroiled in it, I guess.
I totally feel you on all of that. I totally feel you on all of that. And I feel like in my experience, um, it's almost always better to get away from the mind in the way that I'm hearing you speak. And then in my experience, I feel that if something keeps coming back, if something keeps kind of like pestering me, that's like a sign like, oh, maybe I need to like use some other tools to like address whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
And also sometimes like whatever that thing is, like an analogy that I use sometimes is like it's like a crying baby. And like maybe it's like an emotional thing that I need to process. Maybe it's like something that's living in my body. Because all of that stuff's real. Like it's like something that's distracting me from presence, right? Because I think that's the goal is to feel more present in reality. And so sometimes I feel like we have these like crying babies. And it's like that it'll be kind of like I can't even be present because I hear this crying baby. And so I need to kind of like turn towards that and be and approach it. Like, what do you do if a baby's crying? Okay, you have to like be close to it and like give it some attention. And then as soon as the baby has cried, you can come back to presence. I don't know. Does that any? I feel like I just babbled that, but does that make sense?
And yeah, that makes sense. And I think like the idea, I guess, more emotional, psychological ideal of like, caring for our inner child and like
Uh-huh.
talk to self as a loving parent might talk to ourselves like, it's I think a roundabout way of practicing detachment because you're seeing whatever thing is there, but it's now an object to you. And so it's not, you're not identified with it as closely anymore because you're objectifying it and expressing care toward it. And that expressed care or compassion or openness allows for clarity of mind in a way that I think it depends on our intention when we engage with our baggage and our bullshit. It's
Hmm.
we have to normally we come to it like I have to fix this.
Yes.
And so I think that's the reason why getting out of the mind is my number one go to because if we say like, all right, well, no, I need to pay attention to this. Well, why? So you can fix it?
Yeah, totally.
That's not going to work, you know?
Right. And then you problemify. Is that the word? Problemify yourself. Does that make And then all of a sudden you're this big problem. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's it's unfortunate that we make ourselves into a problem to fix.
But I think it's easy to think in that way because certainly on some level there are certain behaviors that we are experiencing that we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that like maybe we just like live in a problem-centric reality where it's like, oh, here's a thing that I don't like. I have to fix that. It's like the whole culture is set up like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but for me, at least, I think the problematic behaviors, we can do behavior modification, we can do thought replacement, we can do all of that preliminary work to kind of make enough space in our cluttered uh area where we can work.
Mhm.
But for me, like the behaviors and all of that we think are so problematic are symptoms of underlying non-conceptual, non-tangible relationship with reality that can kind of only be really affected beneath or behind the mental processes that produce those behaviors. We can't behavior modify or thought replace our way into presence. It, it can be helpful, in my opinion, but like ultimately, those are symptoms of an underlying dissonance.
Mm.
You're not in tune. And so
Yes.
we can try to play some weird scales to make it sound good, but ultimately we have to tune ourselves.
I feel you. Yeah, I think when I'm hearing you say that, I'm thinking of like am I finding the right words for this? It's like the three malas in Kashmir Shaivism of like the ego, the impurities of the ego. And it's like I'm almost like hearing you say like that kind of stuff needs to get addressed more so than maybe behavior change.
Mhm.
So like the impurity of differentiation or like the impurity of individuality or karma, which is like the secret third one that I actually still feel confused about. But and so it's like I'm almost hearing you say like those like kind of core issues are the thing that are going to be more fruitful to address than maybe this more outward stuff that's like a fine-tuning issue. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
and that's just my personal perspective. I know that many spiritual traditions are the reverse. They start with that immediately visible, immediately accessible stuff and then work backward.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah.
that's just not my conditioning. My conditioning is always like go straight to the heart of the problem
Yeah.
and then, as much as possible
Yeah.
and everything sort itself out once you plug a hole in the, you know.
Yeah, I think we're similar because I think I'm also that my tradition has also kind of presented that sort of energy of like, let's get straight to the root of the problem. You probably aren't going to like it, but like, let's get straight to the root of the problem. And then over the course of the last 10 years, I feel like when I look back, the first like 5 years, I didn't do any emotional work on myself. I was just like letting grace work on me and like living the teachings that I was given. And then I almost feel like in the last, so maybe 5 years to now, I started doing a ton of emotional work. And for whatever reason, Ma just like was like, it's time for you to do that. And so it feels almost like now I'm doing much more of that emotional work now. But it's because the core shit is like so deep that it's not even a question. And now we're doing this like fine tuning of like, how do you actually interface with reality?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. I feel exactly the same. But what do you mean by could you say more about like specifically what emotional work would you be comfortable sharing?
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally fine saying like I would say like 5 years ago I started to realize that I had like really serious like intimacy issues. And it was all spurred by 3D reality because I got into a relationship with someone because we're integral yogis that are living in the world. And so I feel like over the course of the last 5 years, like I've done a lot of emotional work about like using Western developmental view of reality. Like I have a fearful avoidant attachment style, like using that language to describe things. I don't feel that way anymore, but that's how I was. And so I was like, oh crap, that's like not helping me in my relationship. I need to like do something about that. And then I started doing like a ton of relational work, like working on my triggers with people, my shutdown. Like I always think of like Ram Dass, like he says, like wherever you shut down, that's your path. And so it kind of that started to come to work. And then in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've become a step parent. And there's all this shit coming up with like having a kid in my house with me. But when I look at like the course of the whole thing, it's like, oh, of course I'm being put in this situation now because this is the perfect time for me to work on all of this psychological sludge because a lot of the core stuff is there's no question about it.
Mhm.
I don't know. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, it seems like getting to the root of the problem kind of prepares you to deal with the permutations of that problem as it expands out in different karma, different ways.
Yes. Yeah, it's like when it gets really hard, I'm never like, oh, is God real? Or like, oh, she's punishing me or whatever. I don't have any of that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, like I'm just ready for this test now. To use the language of test. I don't know if I like that, but you know what I mean? It's like, oh, like this is the thing that she is giving me now. This is the opportunity I have because I'm actually prepared for this opportunity, even though I hate it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I don't know. I think it's a very spiritual thing to let yourself hate something and be like, this is fine.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, damn, like this sucks. And we're just gonna put one foot instead of front of the other. And we're just gonna deal with it. But I think we need to close out. We're around that time. Um, this has been wonderful. It was so wonderful to learn about you in this way and talk with you. And I'm just wondering if there's anything from our conversation that happened where you feel like you like learned something new about yourself or like you saw something in a new way.
Hmm. Yeah, that might take some deeper thought. Maybe I'll have to listen back and
Oh, no, totally fine.
but I guess right off the top of my head, I'd say, um, I guess talking to you makes me realize that I'm not as weird as I maybe think I am. So that's good to know.
Oh, I love that. No. I feel you on that. I feel like if when I'm thinking about this conversation, there's so many things that I've enjoyed about it, but from disciple to disciple, I'll just put it that way, it's just nectar. Like talking to somebody who gets it is just nectar. I don't have any other words for it. I'm like, ah. It's just like, oh, I'm not like you get it. I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yeah, yeah, it's sangha. It's
Mhm.
yeah, I love it. It's been awesome talking to you, and I'm so glad that you're doing this and showcasing the ways that God comes to all of us disguised as our life and how that looks different from everyone and how that's okay. So,
Yeah. You're welcome. Well, do you have anything you want to shamelessly plug for the listeners?
um, well, I'm not sure if your listener base is exactly the same as mine. I'm doing a theology conference in February with Tom Ord, so it's more of it's pretty much mostly Christian stuff, process theology and philosophy. So I'll be sharing about my book, Becoming All Light, there. Um, and then later in October, I think, of this year, I'll be with Keith Christich, who runs Closer Than Breath, which is a contemplative Christian community. And so I think we're going to be doing like a weekend seminar on non-duality and centering prayer.
Oh, that sounds cool. I want to come.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Wait, but could you say just a little bit about your book?
Yeah, so I wrote a book a year and a half ago called Becoming All Light, and it's kind of a theopoetic, not systematic theology at all. But it's just a short look at how I view Christianity in light of um, Vedanta and Shakta Tantra and other traditions in general, and how it gives me the ability to engage with Christian scripture and teaching in a way where it's not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, I guess.
I love it. I love it. That's gorgeous. I actually like have a lot of students and have worked with people even one-on-one who finished their work with me and then realized like, "Oh, I want to explore Christianity now."
Mm.
Like that actually happens a lot, but like they want to go like the Thomas Merton path or they want to go like the mystical path. And so you've actually been someone that I've told people to go to.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah. And so they exist, the people in my audience, you know? They want the info. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Oh, what's your favorite way for people to contact you?
Oh, so I mean, you can do email, Jory at methodsofcontemplation.com, but I'm mostly on Instagram is where I usually hang out. So I'm not super fancy with having multiple different platforms and stuff. That just like stresses me out.
Good
So
for you.
uh, I kind of stick to my little lane and my little Instagram, and that's basically it.
Okay, wonderful. Cool. I'll have that linked for anyone who wants to explore that. But for now, it's been wonderful. And maybe I'll have you back someday and we can talk about something very niche.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Wonderful. We'll talk to each other again soon. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for listening. The information for the guest that I brought on today is down in the description, wherever you listen to this. If you enjoyed this episode, could you do a girl a favor and share it with a friend? Literally, my dream is to be a professional question asker, and being a professional interviewer is, in fact, the way to do that. And so if you want to hear more of these episodes, if you want me to keep doing this podcast thing, the freest way to support me is to just share any Grace Pilled episode with anyone that you think will vibe with it. So that is my call to action there. In addition to that, if you want to learn more about me and see what I'm all about, I've got my website, hannawilliams.com, HANNA Williams.com, or you can catch me on Instagram at grace.pilled. That is where I am the most active. I post memes, mostly memes, and then I yell at the camera often. And if you feel inspired to dive way deeper into my world, I have my Patreon, which is my massive library of talks and courses. And of course, like I said in the very beginning, we have Run Towards the Hard Shit, our 4-week course about interpersonal conflict, which we just launched this week. And we will begin on Wednesday, June 4th, every Wednesday in June. So hopefully I'll see you there. All right. Thank you for listening.